Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to the Rising Convert podcast. This is your host, Kelly, and I'm excited to have you join me in this episode for the Rising Convert podcast. As you all know, the podcast focuses on sharing personal journeys of mine, discussing experiences, and engaging in candid conversations from a Muslim perspective. And in this today's episode, we're going to have a conversation with the one and only our Muslim Reaver sister, AYISHAH from AJS Therapy. Just a reminder to keep up to date with what's coming up for this podcast. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Rise and Comfort, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So we're going to dive right into it. Again, just as a nice little reminder, AYISHAH is a master's in psychology and she is located in Birmingham. And so her being a Muslim revert as well, dedicating her life and her journey into helping Muslims, more so like people like us, who are Muslim reverts and converts in, as she likes to put it, discovering their wings. Hi,
Yeah,
Aisha. I love the discovering their wings. How did you come up with that?
I've got absolutely no recollection of it, but I liked it as well. Sometimes those things they just come.
Yeah. Um, so in this conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about love. And I'm sure you have your shared experiences along with like your areas of expertise of what it's like to navigate love and marriage as a Muslim convert. Um, Now, before we get started, I want to preface, I'm sure you and I both know that my understanding is according to Islam, like, the minimum expectation from believers is that God should have the first place in someone's heart. God should be number one, in the sense that no other love may override one of the love of God. And we're here to discuss the topic of love, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of put that out there and say that. And what is your perspective when you hear that? Um,
I love that. I love how you put that because when we are being reminded about that, not only as the Muslims we can't but agree with that, but also from a psychological perspective, it brings us back to individualism. And it centers us in relationship with ourselves, with our God. So that is very individual. That is very like self-centered perspective on who I am. And because we're going to talk about relationships, we're going to talk about a different perspective, which is communal perspective, which is based in probably roles that we play rather than conscious, spiritual, individualistically driven relationship um, perspective. So, and I'm going to go back to it anyway. So, in today's episode, I believe we're going to try to balance this individual communal, approach to personal growth. And obviously people are there to help us to grow, but grow towards what? Well, grow towards Allah. And if you're growing towards Allah, it's your individual journey. It's great if they help you, not always possible. But in the end of the day, how I like to say it is you are in the center of your universe because on the end of the day, you have only yourself to bring on day of judgment. And none of those relationships, blood relationships, friendship relationships, relationship with your spouse, none of them, they're going to come to your aid. In fact, they have expiry date, and the expiry date is until literally death do you part. So the only thing that you have really for yourself on the day of Akhirah is what those angels are going to ask you in the grave, and then this test in front of Arch of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, who's your Lord, who's your prophet, not they prophet, who were your friends, what is your alliance with this person or the other person. It is going to be purely about you. But it's so easy to forget about that when you are in relationships, aren't you?
I couldn't agree with you more. And when you said it's like the relationship can support you and help you, but it's not. it's not realistic that's not what happens for a lot of us, unfortunately, like based on the stories that I've heard and connections that I've made. Kind of like we said, when you are in that love relationship, and especially when you're thinking about marriage, like it can easily get forgotten. Almost like you kind of get lost. And I know like the Quran talks about it. There's a lot of hadiths and like stories around how you can maintain that love for God at the forefront of a relationship, and to like deepen that love and connection first. And it's an interesting point that you also bring forward. Again, that the relationships don't always help you and support you in this individual journey. And that in the end of the day, this is still an individual journey, your path with God. Um, because there's always these comments, and sometimes it holds truth, but like where a Muslim woman will usually convert specifically only for a man to like marry. For you, like as a psychologist, when you think of maybe this might be a personal experience of yours, I'm not sure, or maybe it's just an experience that you may have heard of. When you think of a situation like that where someone comes in and marries someone, they believe in the religion but haven't done a lot of their own studying and investigation, I guess, around the religion, but they're Muslims. What are two obstacles that you've heard or that you can think of right now that can prevent a relationship from reaching its full potential in that situation?
I like this idea of narrowing it only to two. It gives me like Rahman Rahim to me because there's obviously more than two.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Um,
we're trying to keep it.
I
Yeah,
will, I
close
will,
to
I
two.
will try. I will try. I promise I
We'll
will
try.
try.
I mean, if there's more,
So
like I guess, like just the
yeah.
first maybe top five that would come to mind, but ideally, we're just trying to give, like, just yeah, just trying to get a feel of what your thoughts are as a psychologist.
Yeah, I think, some degree because obviously there are people who are senior to me, but I have some degree of working psychotherapeutically with individuals who come to me and they complain about their relationships. And I have also experience working with Muslim couples, Muslim and non-Muslim couples, and there is some overlap. However, for people of a faith, it's a bit of a more spiritual experience, really. It's more serious because we, in Islamic therapy, in Islamic psychotherapy, we are always reminded, so how is that going to help you in the day of Akhirah, How are you going to look back from the day of judgment or from your grave on yourself right here in this relationship? And what you're going to say to yourself? Are you going to be happy with yourself? Are you going to be disappointed with yourself? So we're always bringing our clients, what I do, to self-responsibility and self-reflection, tafakkur, 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 which translates into contemplation and amana, having responsibility over yourself. It is Khattab, I think, who said, um, take yourself into responsibility before you being taken to responsibility. So, from that perspective, we're not only in those relationships for the sake of progression in this dunya, but also for the sake of um, saving ourselves, not only progression, but saving ourselves on the akhirah. And that very much goes back to nafs. So, you asked me to narrow it to two, and I will really, really try, but I can't start without explaining, without going back to basics, to nafs. Nafs would play out. Nafs is very individualistic. What is nafs? Nafs is particle of your soul. It's not just a soul. Soul is more complicated than just nafs. And I write about it widely in Islamically inspired self-development, uh, the book which is somewhere behind me. Uh, but nafs is that thing that stands between us and our spouse, and that nafs is constantly changing because of our relationships. So the pride, the sense of self, the sense of self-respect, the ego, our needs, our needs for codependency and independence, our expectations, our spiritual fantasies, which I refer to as spiritual amnesia, and I will talk about it. So I come back to it. Please don't say to yourself, "Oh, what's she's talking about?" I will come back to it. Lack of self-responsibility, dropping that responsibility on others. Um, i- i- Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we literally don't know because we've been conditioned in a really destructive way. But I want to say inability, like you're choosing to disable yourself from accessing the higher self. So in psychology, we might call it adult self, and in Islamic psychology, we call it the nafs lawama self, which is taking herself to responsibility. This is that self-reproaching self which helps you to stand in front of your spouse and say, you know what, I really messed up. You know what, I've never seen this from this perspective. I've never actually, thought that I will have such an effect on you or anybody else. So this is a nafs lawama. And on top of that, nafs also, because this is subconscious work, okay? This is subconscious work. So many of those things which I already mentioned they're not brought to our consciousness. We're unaware of it. We unpacking them in relationships, and either we are ready to face them, or we are in the state of denial, and that's basically causing not miscommunication, conflicts in relationships. And there's more to it in NAPS. NAPS carries unprocessed traumas issues, sometimes stemming from previous relationships, but most likely from a conditioning. And even though if you didn't had a trauma in your life, in your childhood, sometimes it's a generational trauma. So we're sort of conditioned by not normal pathological norms of relating to another each other, pathological expectations from life and relationships, and we come into our marriage relationship to our in-law families, and we're being completely shocked. What is this? This is not the language I'm speaking. So it is really all coming back to subconscious and that's work when you have to drop your ego, your expectations of your frustrations, your anger, your pride, and you being faced with responsibility, self-responsibility, and you either take it and run with it and change because of finally seeing it, or you rather retract, or you other sort of choosing subconsciously. This is not conscious work. This is not in your conscious, but subconsciously you're choosing to be stuck. So in general sense, I think these are, from Islamic perspective, I would say that these are main issues. Us not being connected and us not being real with ourselves, and us not being ready to be called home because we don't know each other. We don't know who we are. So if you don't know yourself, if you don't respect yourself, if you don't love yourself, if you don't honor yourself, if you don't give credit to yourself, if you don't give rahma, compassion to yourself, you know, how can you think that you can offer from that empty bucket any of these to your spouse? You can't, because you haven't practiced this on yourself. Yet we're going into relationships. So this is that fantasy, this spiritual amnesia that I referred before. We go into those relationships and we're thinking that everything is going to be hunky-dory, it's going to be bed of roses, it's going to be definitely different to what my parents done. I'm going to be completely different. I'm going to be better, basically. I'm going to put it right. And my spouse, he's going to be an angel. He's going to be a hero. He's going to be a healer. He's going to make it happen for me. So so do you see how it happens? Like we're not ready to look into ourselves and we're dropping it, the responsibility of personal growth, we're dropping it on our spouses. And the worst thing is for reverts, we're not only dropping that, we also dropping the fantasy that he must be Sahabi because he was born in Islam. He was born in a Muslim, so he must know it all. So we're dropping this expectation that we marrying somebody who is, a monk almost, and obviously that person not, and she's not, and he's not. So we have another layer for us as a convert. But seriously, if I were to narrow it down to two common language, mainstream psychology terminologies, I think I would say it is misaligned expectations and unresolved past traumas. I think these are two things that stop us from um, establishing strong relationships. There's more, but I think I will just nail them down to this. And I'm sorry I took so much time about NAS, but I hope it makes sense.
No, please don't ever apologize. I actually really like how you always have a background or give us some knowledge in your thought process and then share your points. I think it makes a lot of sense. And even when you were uh, talking about the expectations, the empty bucket, and then pouring that into someone else's hands. I kind of was thinking about the individual journey that you were talking about earlier on, and how we talk about like that spiritual growth, and that we talk about how at the end of the day we can expect a whole lot from a relationship. And it's so interesting to me because I truly do believe that like for myself when I think about my experience that I could have never entered a relationship, even a marriage, um be, because I if I wasn't ready to go ahead and step in with confidence and with a sense of love for myself and what I've done, what I've been through in my past, like I don't know how I would make a relationship work. And
Mm,
it's very interesting because and I know we t specifically ended it with the thought process of like this happened with Muslim reverts specifically, but I actually almost think like this is very relatable to a lot of just Muslims in general, the Muslim community, because marriage is seriously at the forefront of every relationship and connection being made. And I know that for me personally, that's something that was very new, coming in from like the Western culture and Western world, so we call it, where you can have a casual connection, and marriage isn't necessarily something that everyone is wearing on their sleeve. You don't know if the other person's talking or thinking about marriage. Where when you come in and you maybe dabble into the dating scene of like a Muslim, which I talk about in one of my episodes, you know that marriage is the end result. You know that someone's going to be connecting with you for that. And so it's very interesting when you talk about these two major obstacles because there's a lot of like self work that sounds like that needs to be done on both ends for the relationship to work. Which leads me to my next question for you. When you go into a relationship or based on again your level of expertise and conversations you've had, at what point does do issues begin to arise in a relationship if say two people come together and they haven't done any of that self-work.
mm. Oh, this is very interesting case study. Muskins. Very rarely I come across people who haven't done this work on them. You'd be surprised to know, Kenny, that to my at least experience, and it's going to be probably 15 years in clinical practice, we as Muslims, we are more educated in personal growth than my non-Muslim clients. Can you believe that? So,
Mm.
yeah, so I have clients who come to me and they've been on the therapy or they have the lingo, they operate with jargon, and the work it just goes so quickly, and I can go so much deeper with them because of that interest in their personal growth already. So I think us as a Muslims, as a ummah, as a consciousness, we have changed to what I would call old school. So I'm trying to picture this case study, people who haven't done this work. I think I would talk about young couple, maybe in their 20s, right? because the sense of self really is born after you are 27, 28, 29. That's where the sense of self is sort of becoming quite apparent to us.
Mm.
And before that, if you fall into a relationship, and normally it is a butterfly effect. This is actually a terminology from my books, not my books. I mean the books that I read, the relationships books. And this butterfly effect is those expectations, those misaligned expectations, those old fantasies. And for us as Muslims as well, for you, if you are a spiritual person, you will understand what I mean. We expect a soul mating, not just mating, but also soul mating. So we don't expect just sexual attractions. We don't expect just meeting each other at the level of intellectual, maybe career, maybe social levels. We also expect soul mating. So right now, we expecting a full package, if you like. That wasn't the case before. It
Mm.
wasn't it never ever it was actually a case until now. So what I mean by that, um, it was used to just a contract, and everyone was okay with that they're going to marry within the family, within the tribe. Now we are much more mobile, so our expectation is self-induced, but also because our consciousness has changed. We reason above. We sort of have different expectations, and if you are in your 20s, those expectations they might be a little bit less. You might settle for few. And you come into this relationship. Let's give it a go that it was love marriage. It might be even arranged, but it is love marriage. Nobody forced you to it. And it literally takes you less than 6 months to understand that, when she fast, her breath stinks. Where before he goes to work, he leaves dirty socks and underwear on the floor, and every single time I have to pick it up. It takes little a short amount of time from the perspective of spectrum of your life to realize that she's not angel, he's not an angel. It is just a human being, and whatever I expected, I made out of this person. Actually, this person has another face, another mask, another hat. So you actually getting to know this person, and that can only happen when you're living together. It cannot happen when you are in dating. So for us Muslims, if we are adhering to Sharia, and we don't getting involved too much involved before marriage, then the next stage after butterfly effect, meaning the electrocution stage. So it literally feels like you're having this electric shock. It's hard coming, but it's also fast coming, very fast coming. And then you are going through disillusionment. First, it might be denial, but definitely disillusionment is going to come your way. And because of those traumas, because of this nerves job, when you were not connected with yourself, it's going to flare up. He's going to throw at you meat. You're going to vomit at him his own stuff. And you don't know what to do with it, because we know partnership, marriage is so close. Quran refers to as closer than the garments. It's great when the garment is of a great material, it keeps you warm, it's comfortable, it's fashionable, it's your choice. But what about if it's not? What about if it's too tight? Or what about if it's too loose? What about if the material is scratching your back? And that's what happens in the next stage. And in that stage, I meet my clients. And in that stage, we have to reprogram their expectations, shift their perspectives on themselves and on their contribution to relationship, and then on their vision of their partner.
Mm.
And we have to give them a permission to choose. Okay, to choose. Do you want to go into third stage or not? And the third stage is building bridges. So once you go into this electric shock, you are embracing crisis. And this crisis, normally in your head, is about other person's fault. Never ever does your finger points at you. It has to be very deep, very severe, very dramatic. tantrumish almost, a crisis, for you to wake up and for you to take responsibility, for you to be courageous enough to look in the mirror and say, "Oh my days, this is me. He's right. She's got a point." Rarely does it happen. Alhamdulillah, more and more couples coming to Muslim couples come to this space, therapeutic space, and there is reason why that people need this space. Yeah, and maybe that's for another talk show. But the reconstructuring this butterfly effect, understanding that this is not to stay here forever, would be my job, and um, sharing light from the perspective of Rahma, understanding, no judgment, and acceptance onto what happens in that electric shock moment for them, also would be my job. But absolutely, at all times, it is their job. Um, this is your job if you're listening to make decision whether you're going to build bridges or move apart.
Mm.
And building bridges. Oh, you're not going to like to when I say it. I'm going to say it. Building bridges can last for a very long time. It's not that you build one bridge and halas, job is done. No, you're going to move from crisis to crisis because that's how subconscious works.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and your partner, oh, you're not going to like that, but I'm going to say it. Your partner's job, just as much as it's not your job, his job, her job is not to heal you. Nafs is between you and your Lord. This is your job. If they mirroring something to you, just like in this hadith, where we're being told that a Muslim is a mirror to another believer, meaning we must. Some even say it's fard to give nasiha. So can you believe that nasiha used to, I mean, by many scholars, was until today is considered as a fraud. You need to throw that meat on another person, but obviously in a safe, non-judgmental, private as well, confidential space. So it's not about shaming person; it's about helping person to look into her nafs, really. Now the problem is because we don't have this knowledge, we lost this knowledge. We like illiterate in this emotional language, we don't know how to do it. So sometimes we have great intentions, like have a think, like when you're listening to me, have a think, like try to remember her being really frustrated or her being really sincere or him, almost having tears in his eyes and like asking you, begging you to understand what they're conveying to you and you couldn't. So this is it. This was them mirroring to you. But because of some stuff, in your lives, you just couldn't take it on board. And sometimes those crises, subhanAllah, they feel like we're going round and round the circle, like we're constantly arguing about something. Why are we arguing about something? Because we don't know how to listen to our nerves. We sometimes don't even know that we have subconscious, that we have, that we have on our issues. And because of this fantasy that, she's going to be an angel and he's going to be, he needs to, he needs to be a better person. Sometimes we think we are a better person. Well, in fact, we're not because we're not addressing the real stuff in relationships. So escapism happens. Silent treatment happens, inviting third person in relationship happens. And by third person, I normally talk, I'm normally thinking mother-in-law, but also friends. You letting your private things outside of the bag, and if you're not being careful, you're going against Sunnah because Prophet Sallallahu Nabi himself, he said, don't talk about your intimacy, not only sex, intimacy, those no those crisis situations. Don't put yourself out there because maybe you will resolve this with your spouse, but for sure the community is not going to forget. Yeah, right. So having that hat on your head that you actually in this relationship and you representing him or you representing her, it's about your communal, your couple respect is something that's missing as well very often. So subhanallah, I think if I were to sum it all up, really it is that simple, and that's difficult, um, to to grow into courage, to grow into courage, and to be ready to say, you are right, could solve so many problems. And even if you don't understand, listen, even if you don't understand what he's saying or what she's saying, if you don't agree with it, gain some basic skills, counseling, listening skills, and they will change your life. I know they will change your life because they've changed life of hundreds and hundreds of my clients. It's really that simple and that difficult, learning how to listen to each other's soul. It takes some training. There are great techniques in it, but it can literally change not only your relationship, but your life, your internal life. Not to mention your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because on the other side, there is a self-satisfaction, there is self-compassion, there is being real with yourself, right? And being humble, in being humble. And these, all of those, they are actually spiritual experiences. So what I'm trying to say, if you do with this building bridges right, you're also going to build the bridge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is precious. And him or her in those crises that you're creating, even if they are vicious cycle crises, you always have invitation to become that. Meaning, a bricklayer person towards your Jannat, inshallah.
You know, inshallah, like for the people who are looking for that love or in that relationship, like you said, for those who are listening to the podcast, yes, we have a little guest as well as
Very
recently.
cute one, by the way.
um, and she's feeling pretty chatty this morning. So, just as we're about to wrap this up, yeah, inshallah, for those who are in this relationship can fall into what you're saying, what you're, putting out for them, like, the getting to know yourself through the process of communicating and talking about these things. I know I felt my deepest self and I felt most healed when I was talking to a therapist and trying to navigate my relationship first and foremost with God, the amount of healing that I know that I need to get ahead of and just or become aware of and get a handle of made a huge difference in who I am as a person and in my relationship. So I appreciate you sharing a lot of like your knowledge and your thought process behind this because it's such a big topic amongst us Muslim reverts and converts. We always hear about love and our journeys are always a little different. So, inshallah, like a lot of you who are listening to this have gained some valuable insights from listening into Aisha and having an expert who's has great communication skills and has helped others in her counseling in this area can learn from what she's has stated. Aisha, any last minute thoughts around
Yeah.
just young love or just love in general for us Muslim reverts?
Yeah, definitely. So, if you're thinking about if we're thinking about the theme of today's podcast, love, right? Um, you need to sit down with yourself and understand what is your definition of love, and then you need to sit down with your spouse and understand what are their definitions of love. And subhanAllah, I do it a lot with my clients on couple counseling. And you'll be surprised what comes out of it. Normally, it is narrowed down to not only expectations, but needs. Needs, so we have expectations and needs. We all have our psychological, spiritual needs, and cultural needs, and religious needs. And if you're not connected with them, for yourself. Therefore, you don't know how to communicate it, and another person is not going to read your mind. So, what I'm trying to say, always take yourself to responsibility because sometimes it is about emancipating yourself at the level of expression, very respectful, but expression of your needs. And we call it in today's pop psychology boundaries, right? And toxic relationships. Now, you as a Muslim, you can't just close it to those to this jargon. You always have to take yourself to responsibility. And then look. You also need to sit down with yourself and say, how do I meet needs for my spouse? What my spouse like? What is he or what is she like? What they on about? And sometimes it's about a higher level of meeting their needs, because sometimes, most likely, we are so busy. It's a rat race for all of us. If you have children, and can you know, it is literally mission impossible to initiate any form of intimacy how it was before children, whilst you have children. You just your life is completely changed. Yes, you have expanded as a family, your heart has expanded as a person, your relationship has bonded, but there are things that you will lose out on, and some of those things they're not going to come back to. But you can never take off your hand, or take yourself off the hook. You always you own it to yourself. You own it to yourself to build greater adab that you had every single day. And part of this journey is to ask yourself, how can I be kinder to my family members, to my spouse? What is it that they need? What is it that they're communicating? And what is it that they can't communicate? What do they need, not for dinner, not what do they need to wear, not what they need to eat, but what do they need for personal growth? What do they need for their relaxation? Maybe what do they need for akhirah foremost, right? So these are the questions that we should ask ourselves very often. And they are going to expand our expectations from ourselves, not from our spouse, not from our relationship. You can I can give you maybe a few questions that, if you're listening, maybe write them down. If you're sitting with yourself, ask yourself questions along the line. How do the difference in upbringing between you and your husband enrich your marriage? Not narrows it, but enrich your marriage. So try to tap into positive psychology, which is also blessed by Sunnah. Yeah. How does it enrich your marriage? How do your shared values in this relationship contribute to the vision for your akhirah and to the vision of your family? So first you need to find those values, right? You have to sit down with yourself and discuss, what are your values? Which of your pre-Islam values, if you are Islam, remain important? Halal and tayyib, because trust me, there's so much from your past culture that you can bring and contribute to your marriage and into your family, but you're not able to see it because maybe you don't have enough knowledge about Islam, maybe you're scared, maybe you are still in the stage, oh, it's black and white, I have to leave everything behind. No. Sit down with yourself. Don't deny those particles of yourself which are valid. Find the validity in it and contribute them into relationship. Do I support my spouse in finding halal ways to pursue their pre-conversion hobbies? If you are married to a convert, ask yourself that question. Am I taking those into consideration, or is it only about, I'm sorry guys, but chapati and samosas, in my household? Or am I ready to invite, I don't know, tomato soup? I'm speaking now just symbols, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Ask yourself, do I respond to my spouse challenges or challenging behaviors or challenging reactions with empathy and understanding and openness? Or am I reacting to them with defense? Ask yourself this question. Very important question. Am I open to learning from their perspective and sharing? And am I sharing my own perspective with them? So not only am I ready to learn, but also am I ready to teach? And how am I teaching it? And that's where your counseling skills coming in. How can you align both of your passions? I don't know, whatever job that you're doing, but also spiritual passions within your Islamic identity. Is everything halal tayyib there? No, maybe there's something in your relationship that needs a bit of a tawbah, that needs a bit of a cleansing, that needs to be put aside. And how can I combine my westernized, westernized and individualistic, I would say, self-perception with Islam. So this is if you are a convert. How can I combine it? Like, don't go through your life unconscious, find out what your religion is, and look back at your culture and be strong with things which are pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But also vice versa, how can I balance my Easternness, my Eastern approach to Islam in this relationship. Let's give it for the argument's sake with the Western revert. And how can I grow and learn from it rather than deny it, rather than haram it? Uh, how this is not in your hands. You married, that was your qadr of Allah. He decided that good woman is for good men and bad man is for bad woman. You need to also understand that for however long and however easy or hard it is, you are together. However, this relationship is affecting, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's for you to learn and for you to grow, for you to refine your nafs. And sometimes it's not going to work. Really, sometimes it's not going to work. But if on the day of judgment you are prepared to stay in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, look, I've asked all the important questions Aisha suggested. I worked very hard. I went on the therapy. I involved all those people. I had all the right intentions. I've prayed. I really tried to save this marriage. Inshallah, you covered. So that would be my parting words. Try really hard rather than expect for others.
You definitely I think hit the nail in the coffin there for that one, because I definitely do feel like when you talk about essentially reflection of your personal values and the passions that you have and what you can and cannot bring into a relationship, it's very important. And my husband and I, we always talk about, you know, what it is that we can do to make this relationship grow, especially when we had our first little one here. For those of you watching who can see, it's like how can we go and handle this challenge, this next chapter in our lives. So thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Thank you, Ayisha, for bringing your insights and again, your perspective into this topic of love. Inshallah, a lot of you are going to be able to gain, again, insight about maybe your relationship, if you're in one, a little bit more about it after this episode. I'm wishing you all a wonderful day. And inshallah, if you'd like to connect with Ayisha, you can find all her information in the description box. She hosts YouTubes, has a lot of offerings for personal growth and conversations like this. And of course, for all of you who are listening in, remember you can follow, subscribe at the Rising Convert podcast. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.